Okay, we're good to go.
Okay, everyone, welcome to the KMCDC meeting. This is a special occasion, in case you didn't know. This meeting is our 10-year anniversary meeting, which is very exciting. We had launched this community on July 26, 2013. So this is very exciting for us. We have since convened over 100 meetings on knowledge management. We've had wonderful knowledge and project manager thought leaders that have spoken at our meetings, and we've we've also recorded our meetings and posted a lot of them up on our YouTube channel, KMCDC monthly meeting YouTube channel. Very exciting. And I'm proud to be part of this community that's lasted a long time. I'm hoping that we're got another 10 years. I think Stan's going to tell us about what the next 10 years are going to be like. But we also have some gifts that we're going to raffle off during this meeting as a celebration for this 10-year event. So I'm really glad that you're here, and I'm hoping that you enjoy the session. I know you will, because we have this renowned expert in knowledge management, and he's gonna tell us where KM is going in the next 10 years. So thank you for being part of this wonderful milestone meeting of KMCDC. Thank you. Dan, over to you.
Okay, let's get started then. So I'm going to talk the quest of Bill on the next 10 years, and we'll talk about a little about where we've come from, and we will talk about where we're going. So start out just a little bit about myself. Been in the field for a long time. Spent time most recently at Deloitte, where I was leading communities and the AMR program for Deloitte. Spent 25 years in the computer industry at first Digital Equipment, then Compaq, then Hewlett Packard. Starting the first KM program at Digital and leading the worldwide program at Hewlett Packard. And I've been active in writing and speaking and leading communities for a long time. I've published 4 books, contributed chapters to 4 more. I present every year at the KM World Conference, and I mentioned the SIKM Leaders Community we started in 2005. We now have over 1,170 members, so that's continued to thrive. So if we talk a little about what's gone on in the past, I find it useful to think about eras. Nancy Dixon is the creator of the slide on the right, where she originally had talked about 3 eras of knowledge management, but she then recently changed it to 4, and she defined them, as you see there, as leveraging explicit knowledge, tacit knowledge, collective knowledge, and the creation of knowledge. The way I like to look at it is started using the terminology that was once in vogue if you remember when we had Web 2.0 for a while and Enterprise 2.0. To use that terminology, then I like to look at KM 1.0 as being from around the mid-90s on to 2000, where I think the emphasis was primarily on collection. So there was a lot of emphasis on repositories, skills profiles, collecting documents, putting them somewhere, and using search to try to find them. That was sort of our first wave of knowledge management as a formal discipline. Knowledge management had been around before that, but it often wasn't called that or was not as well known. So Patrick Lamb has actually done some writing about the fact that knowledge management existed well before then, but became pretty well known somewhere around 95. And then if you look at the era that started 2000, where we started using the term Enterprise 2.0, which by the way we don't really use anymore, that was the same time that Web 2.0 came along, and there was an emphasis on a lot of collaborative tools like blogs, wikis, tags, things of that kind. There was a lot of excitement that these were new technologies, and we applied them to knowledge management. And then after about 10 years of that, there was more of an emphasis on connection. So collection in the early phases was about collecting a bunch of documents and content, and connection became a new push, especially with things called enterprise social networks, where we'd look to try to connect people to help knowledge flow between them. And now in the current era, which you might date it back to the start of the 2020s, we're certainly in an era where augmentation is being the focus. And no one here has escaped hearing a lot about AI of late, and we'll talk more in depth about what that might mean for knowledge management. But that's certainly where we are today. So augmenting our capabilities with generative AI and large language models and machine learning, and there's many other things that have been around for a while, but now we're looking at being able to apply them more. So that's kind of how I see the evolution. I don't know what the next phase might be, but after we've been in it, we can probably recognize it. So I'm going to talk about 5 foundations of knowledge management, and then for each one of them, we'll talk about some fundamentals. So those foundations are usability, findability, communities, motivation, and augmentation. And then the 15 fundamentals, 3 apiece for each of those 5 foundations. So we'll go through each of those and talk about them. So let's start with the usability part. Usability or user experience or UX is something that's been around for a while, but we haven't always been good about incorporating it into what we do with knowledge management. We often don't have the best user experiences for what we provide. Many times there's a hodgepodge collection of different systems and platforms that are thrown together, and from the user's point of view, it's not all that good. So the user experience is a person's perceptions and the responses that result from the use of or anticipated use of a product or system or a service. My point here is we've got to do a better job of designing our environment to create a good user experience. We've got the tools, we've got the knowledge of how to do it. We haven't always done it well. So the first sort of prediction for the next 10 years would be let's use all that and do a better job of delivering a great user experience. In so doing, we can take advantage of other disciplines, including one called design thinking. Design thinking is a human-centered approach to innovation that draws on the designer's toolkit, and it takes into account the needs of people, the possibilities of technology, and the requirements for business success. So if you're familiar with design thinking, this is something we could do a better job, once again, of applying to knowledge management environments. We try to design them with the user in mind, not with the provider in mind. So that was always something that I always had to deal with in leading knowledge management programs. Was we either had existing platforms that we were supposed to use, or we had an existing intranet or an existing tool like SharePoint that we were then supposed to provide to our users, but we didn't always design from the point of view of how is this best going to work? Can we prototype, test, and optimize? Instead, it was more like, here, take this. So an example of that is when people end up using the name of the tool to refer to the system that you're offering them, that's kind of a sign that the tool is leading the way rather than the user experience. So we would refer to Yammer and say people have to use Yammer, or we refer to SharePoint or whatever other names were out there, Jive, whatever products people used. And then people would say, well, yeah, we're using Jive or we're using Yammer, as opposed to that was just a tool used within the environment. So we don't really want the tool as designed by the vendor to necessarily design our usability. We want to use more design thinking approaches and deliver a better result. And then the Agile movement came along. Agile development was the start of it, where we manage work by breaking it down into several phases. We collaborate with our stakeholders. We have continuous improvement at every stage. We go through cycles of planning, executing, evaluating, typically in short cycles. And we have continuous collaboration with the team members and the project stakeholders. And this has evolved into being more broadly now called Agile management, with small teams and short cycles, customer driven, and based on a network, not on a hierarchy. Well, this is a discipline that's now been around for a while. The Agile Manifesto has been around for some time, We aren't all necessarily using this in knowledge management or in our associated IT departments that we work with, but we should, right? We should always be thinking in terms of how can we deliver something that's useful as rapidly as possible, test it out, get feedback from our users, improve it, and iterate. That's always been true. Even before we called this Agile, I used to advocate for that. And so now we have a name to call it, but the same principles apply. It's not about going off and designing some giant system and taking 6 months to a year to build it and then deliver it and then find out that it doesn't really meet the needs of users. You want to deliver things quickly, get feedback, and continuously improve. The next area is findability. And findability is something we're all interested in. Our users definitely are looking to find information. They're often struggling to find information. It's a common challenge that we have to overcome. But we can use information architecture to do a better job of delivering findability, right? So I've been involved in certain situations where I've advised companies on their knowledge management approaches. What I find is a lack of an information architecture, where there's just a collection of varied systems. No one has taken any time to evaluate what all they have and how these things were supposed to be designed, how they're supposed to fit together. So information architecture is a very useful discipline that we should be using to organize, structure, and label content effectively and sustainably so our users can find information and complete tasks. We want to help the users understand where they are, what they found, what's around, what to expect. And if we do a good job with information architecture, then what we deliver, not only from the point of view of the user experience, but also from the back end, the systems underlying it, if they're designed well, they will enhance findability because there'll be techniques and tools that can be used to make the content more findable. And along with that is enterprise search. Enterprise search has been around for a while. It's probably something that many of us are working with or struggling with, trying to make content from multiple enterprise type sources, such as databases and intranets, searchable to a defined audience through a single ubiquitous search engine. So many of us who confront enterprise search will face some of the same difficulties, right? It doesn't necessarily connect to all of the sources that we would like it to. The content that we're searching for may not be well defined. It may not be well tagged. There may be missing or poor metadata. The content may not even exist that we're searching for. So enterprise search is often blamed for the failures of findability when in fact there are other causes. But if you step up a level and say, if we can deliver a good enterprise search experience through a combination of good information architecture and good metadata and the ability to use search best bets and provide answer cards and things like that, there's a lot of ways that we can improve the enterprise search experience so that our users find it more successful and less frustrating. Mandy mentioned curation as one of the tasks that she's doing, and I certainly think that's an important one as a part of knowledge management. We don't always emphasize, but curation can really enhance findability by taking existing information and making it more useful by better organizing it, making it easier to find and easier to use. So among the techniques that have been effective for curation include creating search best bets and publishing frequently asked questions and monitoring and tagging and enhancing online discussions so that people can readily find them later, and then to compile and share content and resources so that other people can use them. This is certainly something that I've spent much of my career doing, even before I was doing knowledge management as a full-time job. I spent a lot of my time curating information from people because it's always been a need. Information exists, it's not always easy to find, or it's not always organized or structured in a way that you can use it. So as knowledge managers, if we can do a better job of curating it so that our users can better find it and use it, then that's part of what we should be doing. We've already talked a fair amount about communities, and I've mentioned that communities are extremely important to me and to the knowledge management programs that I've been involved in. And I'd like to talk about 3 elements of a community program that I think we should all be stressing. So we can talk about communities for a long time. We could do the whole hour just on them, but let's talk about 3 things that I think I would like to stress. And the first one is that we want to have unique communities and prevent redundant ones. Now, this could be controversial. There could be people who say, no, they don't agree with that. But I'm giving you my point of view based on my experience in leading communities for quite a while, which is that if you have a central directory of communities, you'd like there to be the minimum number of communities for people to have to look at and figure out which one they should go join. If you have multiple communities that focus on the same or similar topic, it's just frustrating to someone trying to figure out which one to join. They don't have time to go look at them all. So you'd rather just have a single community that sort of stands out. They can look and see, oh yes, that's the one. And then when they join it, then all the people who are involved in it are in that community. They're not split up into separate ones. You don't have different silos that are isolating people that should have been connected. If everybody who's involved in one of the specialty areas communities focus on are in the same place, then all the benefits that come from communities can come about. You also can achieve critical mass, which you need in order to be able to make sure that the community takes advantage of scale. So the point here is, if you don't already do this, if you don't control the creation of communities, or if you're thinking about starting them up, one important point is to have a single community for each important topic to your organization, rather than have multiple communities on the same thing, or to have sort of an uncontrolled wild west where anyone can create one, and it's hard then to keep them sorted out. I remember when I took over the worldwide KM program at HP, this was not the case. We had 2,000 different communities, and they were all equally unsuccessful because no one could figure out any of them to join, and they were all basically dead. So we narrowed that down to a list of 30 communities, one for each important topic. Then the communities were able to take off and be successful the way we wanted them to. Next thing is you want a comprehensive set. You want a unique community, but you also don't want to be missing any for important topics. So if you can do some analysis of what's important to your organization, what are the important topics and roles and specialties that should be covered, and have one community for each one, and not have more than one, but not have less than one, then you'll have the right mix. So what you see here pictured is the community directory that we had at Hewlett-Packard, with listing the communities that we had in existence. And if you have that single directory where people can go, and it's not too long and unwieldy, and if you use the right names so people can recognize what the community is about using industry standard terminology and specialties that they identify with in their roles, then it's easy for them to look through it, say, yep, that's mine, join that one, and go from there. So a comprehensive set where you cover all the important topics. Maybe you don't start out with all of them, but you start out with let's say the most important ones, and over time you expand to eventually try to cover them all. And that number will vary for each organization, but it's going to be some number of communities. It's probably not one unless it's a small company, but it's more than one. And then if you get the right mix, you've got half the battle solved right there. And then the key part, we were talking about this at the start, is what do you expect people who join communities to actually do? If you want your entire organization to belong to at least one community, which was a goal that we had set for our population at Hewlett-Packard, we wanted them to join at least one community, and we wanted them to include the one that was most relevant to their work. And this was important because if everyone belongs to one community, including the one that's most relevant to them, then you have the ability to deliver on a powerful promise, which is you can say that if you want to reach the people that know about that topic, they're in the community. But in order for that to be true, you have to do one more step, which is the people not only have to join the community, they actually have to subscribe and read to its notifications. If you join a community and you don't get notified when there's a post, then it's likely you won't be able to keep up, you won't be able to help out when needed, you'll miss out on what's going on. So you don't want join-only community members, you want community members who actually pay attention. Now, it doesn't mean they have to post. We were talking before about lurkers. Lurkers are fine. 90% of community will be lurkers, but as long as they're reading and paying attention and following, that's great. They'll learn and they'll benefit. But if you have people who join the community that don't pay any attention to its activities, that don't know when something's been posted, they don't know when a question's been asked that they might be able to answer, then you're not getting the benefit out of the community. So you really need to have these three elements. You got to have unique communities, you got to have comprehensive set, and you have to have members who actually join and pay attention. And if all those things are true, then you can make a powerful promise to your audience, which is if they have a question or a need, they can go to the community and they will get their question answered or their need solved, because everyone who might be able to help them will be in that community and they'll be paying attention. Now, nothing what I'm talking about here is necessarily new or it's not futuristic. I'm not talking about some wild futuristic thing, but these are things that are not always true today. Some of you mentioned you're just getting started with communities. So at any given time, approaches that have existed for a while are new to some organization, and applying them in the right way can make the difference between whether they're going to succeed or whether they won't. Moving on to the next category, which is motivation. Always been a challenge for knowledge management is motivating people to do the things you want them to do. If you want them to join communities and pay attention, that's something you have to try to motivate them. If you want them to contribute content, if you want them to reuse content, there's a long list of things that you may want them to do as part of your objectives for knowledge management. And how do you get them to do that? So one of the ways that I found worked well is simple recognition. Just merely thanking somebody for doing it can encourage them to continue doing it. Or if they post something, putting a like on it, or issuing praise to someone specifically for doing an action that benefited you. Publicity of knowledge sharing behaviors and people who reused content, and even specific honors that can be used. There's a wide range here of recognition that you can do, ranging from just simple thanks all the way up to formal rewards programs. But the point is that if you start by spending time recognizing the behaviors you want, that's a good step. That's a good step in the right direction. People will begin to recognize that if I do this, someone is paying attention and they're aware of it and they're actually taking the time to thank me for doing it. So I'm likely to keep doing it. Whereas if there's no recognition at all, then it's like, well, what difference does it make? I don't need to keep doing that. So I would start with recognition as the first part of motivation. That leads to the second part, which is you can actually use rewards. This is a position that not everyone agrees with me about, and some people argue that rewards are a bad thing and that people should be intrinsically motivated, not extrinsically motivated to exhibit the desired behaviors. But my own view on this is that offering rewards has multiple benefits. It's not just that people will get more money or get some kind of a gift. It also signals to the organization that this is important. So I had experience doing this at Hewlett-Packard. We started a program called the KM program, and it started out with just recognition. People would get recognized. They were called the KM Star of the Month. They got a letter from the head of the organization. But later we added a rewards component. And one of the things I mentioned before about agile development is that you want to start out by trying things out and seeing how they work. So if someone tells you that something won't work, that may be true, but often the best thing to do is just go ahead and try it out and see for yourself. It may work, it may not work. You may have to tweak it in order to get it to work. When we first rolled out KM Stars, we had to tweak it, we had to improve it. But eventually it began to work pretty well. And when we added a financial rewards component to it, it turned out that was successful, that people actually were motivated by that. We had friendly competitions going on across the world. But you can use financial rewards in a variety of ways. It can be tied to salary increases or promotions or bonuses or gifts or trips. There are a lot of ways to do it. But something like that, usually in addition to making somebody feel good that they won something, it also becomes good because it signals to the people that this is important enough where the organization is funding it. Therefore, it must be good to do. Therefore, I should do it. And then I mentioned the KM Stars program. That was an example of gamification. Gamification is something that's come along, let's say, within the last 10 years, and it is about using game mechanics to encourage people to behave a certain way. So you can have point scoring where people earn points for certain behaviors. That's how KM Stars worked. You got 1 point if you posted in a community. You got 5 points if you contributed a document to a repository, and you got 10 points if you had a refereed white paper published. And those points built up. There was leaderboards, there was competitions and so forth. But also you can use things like completion percentage. Some people are motivated by that. If they see that they're not 100% complete in filling in their profile, that'll drive them to just ask, what do I have to do to complete it? Or it can be competitive, where they're having friendly competition going. In the case of KM Stars, we had the entire country of England very, very interested in competing in that. And we always got a winner every month from England because that's something that took off there, and it was a friendly competition. We had a rule that you couldn't win more than once, but every month there was a different winner that came from the UK, and that was partly because they did a great job of making that into something that was fun. And we used rankings, and you can also have digital badges like you see here, where somebody earns a digital badge for doing certain things. What I encourage you to do with digital badges is not to use them in ways that can be negatively received. I remember when I started using an instance of Jive once where they had badges that were like a newbie or something, or junior. I mean, it was kind of condescending. So I would say avoid that sort of thing. That if you're going to use a badge, it should always be a positive thing, not a negative thing. And we'll move into the area that's probably of the greatest interest today, the area of augmentation, the idea of how we can augment our human capabilities through the use of things like artificial intelligence. And obviously, I don't have to tell you that it's being really hyped today. There's people that are excited about it. There are people that are worried about it. But certainly, we are in a new era where this can really be applied to knowledge management. I'm going to talk more about how that can be done. But basically, if you start with a generative AI or generative chat, these are algorithms capable of generating seemingly new, realistic content from data they're trained on. They can be pointed to text and images and audio and software code and data and 3D renderings. There's probably no limit to what these AI tools can be pointed to, trained on, and then they can start to generate things, including music, including audio and video and photos and so forth. So this is both exciting and scary at the same time. If we're able to harness it to serve us, that's where the point I make of augmentation, where it augments humans rather than replaces or takes over for them, then it has a lot of potential power, but that's certainly one that we're going to hear more about. Another area of augmentation is in decision support. So we should be able to use the data we get from different areas and let AI help us by analyzing, comparing multiple alternatives and help us to make informed decisions. So we're not asking the computer to make decisions. We would like them to augment our ability to make decisions. And often that's very powerful because there are things as humans which we would forget or overlook or not take into account. And a decision support augmentation approach could help us to not miss anything, take into account all the available data and inform us. But at the same time, the human still could make the ultimate decision supplemented by the work of the AI tool. And then where it can really be specifically applied is areas like auto classification. So if you've been spending time in the past trying to do tagging of content or assign metadata, or if you've been frustrated that people who contribute content to repositories don't take the time to add useful metadata to them, well, auto classification can be one approach to solve that. You can scan the contents of documents, automatically assign tags or descriptive labels or keywords to the document, and then with the support of taxonomies and knowledge graphs, you can index the content to appropriate categories. So this can enhance findability. It's using essentially an augmentation approach so that we get a better end result with better metadata assigned to content, but it's done through automation rather than done through manual intervention. So those were the 15 fundamentals. Now let's talk a little bit about some trends that have been going on in knowledge management, not just now, but for a while and into the future. And this list will probably get updated over time, but it doesn't change that often. One of the things about people who ask me to talk about the future of knowledge management is knowledge management changes a little bit over time, but doesn't change that much. Some of the same things we've been doing for the last 25 years, we're still trying to do. In some cases, we're still struggling to do the same things we've been trying to do. So that won't necessarily change. What will change is with the advent of things like generative AI, there are a lot of things that we may have been doing that were laborious and time-consuming and labor-intensive that we can now offload to technology, and then hopefully we can redirect our human energies towards other things that are more beneficial. But let's talk about some of these trends. You've probably seen most of these yourself, but I'll touch briefly on each one. So digital workplace and digital transformation are sort of buzzwords that have come along in the last 10 years, and they have to do with trying to make things that maybe worked more manually or were more labor intensive to be more automated, to use more digital content, to more digital processing than we did before. Working out loud is a particular discipline that has been touted, but I don't think has really caught on the way that those of us who believe in it would like to have seen. The concept behind working out loud is that you narrate your work and you have observable work, and so that whatever you're doing, anyone else can discover, they can offer to contribute to it, They can be aware of what you're doing. It makes a much more transparent work environment, but people tend to be reluctant to be transparent. So the benefits of working out loud are still there to be taken advantage of by those who will try it, but it's often going to be a struggle because you may be an advocate of it, but the people that you're working with may be wary of the idea of sharing very openly what they're working on. Community management has been around for a long time, but it's become more of an accepted discipline in recent times, in particular with regards to communities that are brand-focused communities rather than internal communities. So now it's not at all uncommon for most companies to have their own brand communities where they're reaching out to their customers and their brand endorsers and their influencers and trying to harness them into a community. But they don't always work the way communities should work. If you're just really trying to use it as a communication channel or a way of roping in customers, it doesn't really work the way communities are supposed to work, which is that it's a bi-directional exchange of information between all the members of the community and the company that's leading it. So the fact that companies have brand-oriented communities can be a good thing because community management then becomes a recognized discipline with lots of jobs. But it also is a word of warning is that you want to try to manage those communities as you would manage internal communities so that there's good knowledge sharing occurring between all the members as well as communications flowing outward. Artificial intelligence, we've talked about, we'll talk more about, so I'll skip over that. Analytics and business intelligence are supporting technologies to artificial intelligence, but we have more tools for doing that nowadays. They should be a part of what's going on in knowledge management. Number 6 is an interesting one, the enterprise social network. I think that it's a trend, but it may be trending in the wrong direction now. I was a big supporter of enterprise social networks. I led the Yammer program for Deloitte, and so I saw the power that they could bring. But there are many organizations that are now sort of backing away from using it. So those programs that were successful for a while, in some instances, they're not active any longer, or it's fallen into less use. And so I would say this one bears watching as to whether it's a trend that's already come and gone. If so, it's unfortunate because there's tremendous power in using an enterprise social network tool like Yammer. But Microsoft has done part of the disservice to it by having so many different confusing and overlapping products, including Microsoft Teams. Now they have Viva Engage. And so by the time you get done with all that, it's not clear, like people even who are Microsoft customers, what am I supposed to use for team collaboration? What am I supposed to use for community collaboration? The official answer has been you use Yammer for communities and you use Teams for team collaboration, but often that's not the case. People are using Teams more broadly and it doesn't work as well for communities. So I'd say this is one to watch. If you can get enterprise social networks off the ground and thriving in your organization, I think that's a good thing, but be wary that it's also potentially under attack and going the wrong direction. Chat tools, certainly like Slack and Microsoft Teams, have taken off widely. They can be quite useful if used in the way that they're optimal for. If you use them for team-based collaboration, that's fine. But when they try to extend them, make them into communities, that's where they don't do as well. They're not really designed to scale like that. They don't really have all the functions you want for a good threaded discussion archive. So I would say watch out for that. Use chat for what it's good for, but use other tools like enterprise social networks for communities. We already talked about gamification. There are certainly things going on there where there are tools available for it. It's being built into more things, and you have to keep a watch on that. But if you don't have it built into your tool, it's something to consider adding as a program of your own. Agile methodology I talked about as an important area that we can use to more rapidly improve our KM environments. And then the advent of mobile apps and bring your own device. Certainly everything we deliver now, we've got to make sure it runs really nicely on whether it's the desktop or whether it's on a phone. We've got to offer different user interfaces that all work optimally for those devices. We talked about digital transformation. I'll quickly go through this one. 10 ways to do digital transformation, starting with improving the user experience by using a digital workplace, by moving from intranets and publishing in them to interactive digital experience portals and digital experience platforms, championing the effective use cases for team spaces and group chat and enterprise social networks, when to use each, how they all interrelate, Integrating web conferencing with knowledge management. So like we're using a tool like Zoom right now in this call. How can we integrate that in so that the chat that we've been doing and the recording of this call are nicely available immediately afterwards so people can reference it and use it? Making enterprise search more like internet search. It's an age-old thing. People want to know why the internal search doesn't work like Google, but that's what we have to try to deliver, get closer and closer to that as much as possible. Implementing social software, including things like podcasts and videos. Certainly today, podcasts and videos are wildly popular in the general world. We need to take advantage of that popularity and use them more for our knowledge management work. So getting podcasts going as a way of communicating and sharing information, and getting more videos, which is what people often prefer as a way of understanding how to do something, making more of those available. Promoting the appropriate use of gamification and digital badges, integrating e-learning into knowledge management, facilitating the production and use of analytics and big data, and then finally, what we'll talk more about now is developing practical uses for AI. I'll just, before I get into the AI details, just sort of leave you with these 15 key issues in knowledge management. And I would say these are kind of like timeless issues. They would have been issues in the past. They'll probably continue to be issues in the future. So this isn't necessarily any kind of a futuristic talk, although having augmented and augmentation in there is a little bit more current than we would have talked about way in the past. But those of you who've been around know that AI is not new either. AI has been around since I started digital 40 years ago. We were doing AI, so it's not new. It's just that we got some new exciting tools to use that have finally come about. But in key issues, getting senior leadership support is always going to be it's always going to be an issue in knowledge management, and nothing's going to change there in the 10 years. If you have your leaders support and those leaders understand what you're doing, and they will champion it for you, and they will be able to speak about it, and they'll talk about it knowledgeably, there's nothing more powerful than that. If they'll lead by example and use the processes and tools that you're advocating, that's the best thing possible. On the other hand, if they don't, if they get lip service to it, or if they're skeptical about it, then you don't usually get much further than that. The next one is to balance people, process, and technology. So we're always in a sort of a dilemma of technology fascinates us and we want to lead with it, but we have to keep it in balance. It's really there to support the people and the processes, so keeping them in a balance is always a challenge for knowledge management. We have to deliver business benefits. We have to start with what are the business objectives we're trying to support, not start with what we want to do in knowledge management. We have to motivate the desired behaviors. Everyone needs to establish a vision for knowledge management. If you don't have one, I encourage you to create one. And to answer the question, if KM is working the way that I want it to, what does that look like? What's the end state that I'm trying to get to? If you can't articulate that quickly and passionately, then you'll have a tough time with number one, getting leader support. So you should be able to, if anybody came up to you and said, what's this knowledge management stuff about? You should be able to go into a quick and a succinct and impassioned answer to that. It says, this is what we're trying to do, and when we get there, this is what it's going to look like, and this is going to be the benefit to our organization. And you want the people then to be sort of nodding their heads after that as you do that. You've got to have compelling use cases. One of the problems with things like Yammer was they would try to roll it out by just saying, we want everybody to use Yammer. And that's not a very compelling use case. You have to give them much more specific use cases. So I spent time coming up with 7 use cases at Deloitte that we used to make Yammer appealing, and saying that it did these 7 use cases better than any other tool. So you need to have those use cases in mind so that people ask, why should I do this? Why should I learn this new tool? Why should I stop doing something the old way? You've got to have a pretty good argument about why what you're offering is so much better and easier and makes their life better. You'll run into problems with people not asking for help. So even if you have the best tools in the world, if people won't use them because they're afraid, you won't get the results that you want. So you have to have ways for people to ask for help, and may have to give them anonymous channels for doing it, or other ways, so that they don't have to be embarrassed or fear that they're going to be exposing their ignorance. But understand that's a challenge that we have to overcome. Making information findable, certainly that's an age-old challenge. I don't think it's necessarily going to get tons better. AI might make it better in that it can interact with people answering questions in chat and find it for them. But we still have the question then, are the answers that they're giving back accurate? So it may be more easy for them to give you an answer, but it may not be a good answer. So we're going to switch maybe more from can we find it to what are we finding and is it valid? Connecting people to each other is never going to be something that we should stop doing or won't emphasize. And the discussion I had today with one of my colleagues about this, he was making the case that AI can certainly replace a lot of the work that we do manually in terms of content management and content cleansing. And I agree with him, but I said, it's not going to take the place for connecting people to each other. So like we're doing right here today, we're interacting, we're talking. That's something that we'll still continue to want to do. And the more connections we can make, the better. And even if we can't do any of these other things, if we can connect people, that's still powerful. We can improve decisions and actions. We should always focus on a few initiatives, not on too many. If you try to do too many things, you probably not succeed at any of them. Delivering what people actually need and want, not trying to do what you think should be done or what your superior asked you to do, but what do people want? So you have to try to find the sweet spot between what you think should be delivered, what your leadership wants, and what the actual users of it want. And if you can find that sweet spot where they intersect, that's what you want to deliver. Communicating by pull, not by push. So one of my colleagues today was talking about how he was a member of a Yammer group that he could not leave. If he tried to leave it, he would automatically be added in, and he was constantly getting email from that community, and it was really aggravating him. And so you don't want to do that. You want to communicate by allowing people to subscribe, to opt in, to pull content, not to push it out to them. Augmenting and automating, certainly we're going to talk more about ChatGPT and integrating KM into the flow of work. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to skip through these quickly because I want to get to the AI portion. But this is part of my most recent book, The 5 C's of Knowledge Management. And I've been creating infographics out of these. So what I'll do is I'll just quickly show you them, but I won't go through each one in the interest of time. So the first one from the 5 C's of Knowledge Management is capture. And so capture, we talked about capturing content, information, input, collections, and libraries. There's instances there that you can go through, but I'm going to go through these quickly. So that's number one, is capture. Number two is curate, which I've already talked about. Curating best bets, frequently asked questions, curating online discussions, and curating various collections and contacts and content. So this is another key knowledge management principle that I think sometimes gets overlooked because we focus more on capture and search, but curation, equally important. Number three is connect. I just mentioned that we want to be able to connect people to people. We also want to be able to connect people to content so they can find it. We also connect content to content through the use of taxonomies and thesaurus and links. And we also want to make it so that our external users can connect with us with appropriate security. Number four is collaborate. We've certainly all been collaborating, but what kind of collaboration we're talking about here includes team collaboration, communities, and events. And then finally, working out loud. So if you have the ability to do one of these things, I would certainly focus on supporting teams with team spaces and group chat, but then making sure you have appropriate tools to support communities for online threaded discussions. And the fifth C is creating new knowledge, innovation. We're talking about methods that we can create that are new, capturing ideas from people that we can turn into new implementations, capturing things like white papers and analysis. There are a lot of different ways to create knowledge. This is often the forgotten part of knowledge management. We talk about it, we say we want to do it, but we don't always know how to go about doing it. So if you can figure out better ways to capture ideas from your population and turn them into new innovations, that's a powerful advantage that knowledge management can help with, but you need to think about how is it you're going to apply it so that that actually happens. So now we get to the last part, which is to quickly go through in the remaining 15 minutes some use cases for ChatGPT and GPT-4 for knowledge management. So this came up a couple of months back. I was on a call where we talked about how can we use this for knowledge management. So I actually went to ChatGPT and I asked it to tell me. So I thought the best way for me to get some experience in using it and also see what it spit back was to ask it, how can I use ChatGPT for knowledge management? So it comes back with these answers, and I had to edit this up a little bit, which reminds us that we have to take the output of ChatGPT and we have to look at it and think about it, is it reasonable or not, and do some tweaking of it. But it can give us a pretty good head start to doing a lot of manual searching. So it came back and said that it could be used for these things that you see here: natural language processing, question answering, content creation, internal knowledge management. And this all sounds really good. Well, some of it is just sort of words being put together that sound good, and you can kind of nod and go, that sounds good. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can actually do all of these things or that doing it would be trivial, but I think it shows us what the potential is, that there's no question that tools like ChatGPT can really help us in knowledge management by doing things better than we might have done less well before, and actually taking on tasks that we can then offload from people so we can do more important tasks. So if you took an example here, can it really help with problem solving? Maybe. It says it can be used to solve complex problems, but that sounds good, may or may not be true. Can it help with decision making? It probably can, as long as we consider it with a grain of salt when we look at whatever it recommends. But at the ones at the top, there's no question that it can really do a good job already on content creation and summarization. So there's things that it can do now, and there are things that it can probably do later. We just have to be careful, because what are we going to point it at? If we're looking at internal data to train it on, where is that coming from? Then I went through and I asked it for each of the 50 knowledge management components that I've defined. What can it do in each one of them? So I'm not going to go through 50, but I'll go through a select subset of that and show you what it came up with. So for surveys, it can generate the survey. It can classify the text that comes back as a result. It can do analysis of the survey results. So once again, this can be pretty powerful. Rather than you having to labor on creating and analyzing a survey, ChatGPT could do it for you. For training, it can generate content. It can act as an instructor. It can answer questions, can do assessments, can create tailored training experiences. Once again, this sounds really good, but you have to sort of dive in and see, all right, let's put it to the test. Let's try to create some adaptive learning using it. What are we going to train it on? What's it going to look like? Will the training that it produces be acceptable to us? Documentation. It can generate content. It can summarize text. It can do automatic translation. These sound good, and I think it can do these things. So I guess the theme that's running through all these is it's got some pretty good answers that sound good to us. We have to be a little skeptical about it. We have to put it to the test, but there's no question the potential is there. For communications, it can develop a virtual personal assistant that can assist people with scheduling and reminders and other communication tasks. It can translate for us. It can summarize for us. It can do sentiment analysis of communications. If you have a user assistance or if you have a knowledge help desk, ChatGPT might be able to supplement or replace that. It could do question answering through chatbots. It can have a knowledge base that it can use to come up with support-related information, help the agents that take calls, can do automatic ticket routing. So it sounds like it could really help there. Knowledge creation and innovation can be used to generate new ideas and concepts, which can be used as the starting point for innovation projects. For prototyping, it can be used to generate prototypes of new products and services and processes, and it can help to validate concepts. In knowledge capture, it can be used to analyze and categorize large amounts of unstructured data, make it easier to store and manage it, and can do data analysis. For knowledge reuse, it can generate content such as articles, blog posts, product descriptions, proposals, presentations that can be reused so that you actually have a better quality piece of content than you would have otherwise if you were randomly searching through an archive. Content management, generating the content, summarizing it, categorizing it, and doing analytics on it. For taxonomy, it can generate a taxonomy. It can categorize content. It can do taxonomy mapping and taxonomy analytics. Now, this sounds like, to me, an area that something could be taken advantage of right away, because as I mentioned before, auto-classification can be a powerful tool to assist us in making sure that our content is more findable. So I think this claim is one that I tend to believe. Metrics and reporting. We used to do a lot of manual work at HP generating our monthly reports for all of our metrics. Well, certainly this kind of a tool can help us with that by doing report generation and data summaries, data visualization, analytics, and even automated reporting. So at the right, you see it. This is a graphic that we used when we were reporting to management in HP's KM program with 5 different metrics that we had. It would be great if we had a tool like this that could have generated this for us, but instead we actually had to once a month spend several days of manual work compiling data, pulling data together, and then running reports and analysis on it. It can do social network analysis. So it can visualize a network, can do the actual social network analysis that otherwise would have been very labor intensive to do. Often this is done either with manual surveys, interviews, or with survey tools. But if you could have the tool go out and look at the network and see who you interact with by your email, by your chat, and come back and draw the network graph, that would certainly be powerful. For storytelling, it can generate stories and develop narrative. It can create anecdotes, and anecdote sharing gets me a little worried that if it's creating anecdotes, where is it creating from? Are these, in fact, legitimate anecdotes based on reality, or are they made up? And then finally, the technology components. I didn't go through each of these, but for each one of these, there's certainly a role that ChatGPT would probably come back with and say that it could help with all of these things, right? So I just went through the people and process components that I showed you the answers that I got back. But the kind of the conclusion that you can draw is, A, there's lots of potential there. B, some of it really has to be verified. And C, we need to start trying these things out, right? We got the idea. Let's test it out and see what it actually can do. So wrap up here and allow for some questions. If you need additional information, first of all, I mentioned the SICAM Leaders Community, so you can join it by going to that address and joining. I encourage you to do so if you're not already a member. You can follow me on LinkedIn, where you'll find out what I'm posting pretty much every day, what I'm up to in terms of shared content and presentations and events and so forth. You can visit my website at that address, where you'll find a wealth of content over the many years that I've been assembling it. Do a lot of curation of my own and other content. So if you need resources on knowledge management, whether those be websites, books, blogs, communities, conferences, it's all there. And then you saw me using some of these infographics as we went through today. That's going to be part of my next book that I'm working on now, called Knowledge Nuggets, 100 KM Infographics. I issue a new one online every Monday, and but ultimately there'll be 100 of them collected in my next book that'll be published by Lucidia. And this is one of them here. This is showing essentially what I went through earlier, the 5 foundations and the 15 fundamentals, shown as an infographic. So that's what you can look forward to. So I'll stop there and see if anybody has questions for me.
Okay, thank you so much. And we already have one from Brett. So Brett, I'm going to go ahead and ask if you want to unmute yourself and just ask your question directly.
Hey, Stan. Question one is, I'll be honest, I'm a little surprised. We haven't talked about the KM profession. Us practitioners, where is this going in 10 years as far as a discipline? I know we've tried to create a career field on the government, on the federal government side, and that's run into some minefields, similar on the military side. And of course, there really is only a couple of educational institutions that are really training, professionally candidates. So where's this going in the future? Oh.
So Brett, I think the answer to that is it's probably going to be much as it's been. I always view the profession as being very cyclical, meaning that individual KM programs come and go all the time. Organizations start KM with lots of enthusiasm. New people enter the field. We see them every year at KM World. They're excited. They're learning about it. They're in my KM 101 workshop. But there's sort of an equal number of organizations that are cutting back or totally eliminating KM. And after they do that, eventually they'll realize that they still needed it, and they'll start it up again. And then there'll be another rev. So what I would say about the profession is it's fairly stable overall. It's not growing. There aren't lots and lots of new net knowledge managers that I'm aware of, but we're not shrinking. The people who get laid off at one organization get hired at another one. So consequently, what we have is sort of this stability. The people continue to have, there's still jobs being posted all the time. People are being hired. So that's the good news on the profession. But the bad news is, if you want to think about the field as growing and being much larger, I don't see that as likely. I see it as something that is not institutionalized in any organization. It's not a given. We don't think of knowledge management as being a given in any organization the way we'd think of the HR department or the finance department or the legal department. So consequently, because of that fact, it's going to exist because it actually is needed. But when there's ever a reorganization or a cutback or a downturn, it's one of the targets that usually suffers from that. So with that in mind, I would say people entering the field that they can find work, they can find satisfying and rewarding work, but they also have to be prepared for the fact that at some point they may have to find their next job. That's been my experience for as long as I've been in the field.
Hey, Bill, can I ask one more question?
Sure. I don't think anyone else has
All right.
popped up, but go ahead.
So, all right, so Sam, what's your take on data literacy, and what's KM's role in training or promoting this idea of data literacy?
Well, I guess it depends on how you define data literacy.
I'll play your silly game.
So,
I guess the bigger piece of this is that we use the term data, even though we have this DIKW, DIKUW triangle, where data is really just a mass of stuff, and really what we deal with is information and knowledge. But there still seems to be this desire to bring the word data into the conversation at different contexts. So I guess, from that standpoint, where do you see this going?
well, I'm not a believer in the DIKW pyramid, so I'll put that aside. Data is something that we all have in abundance. We have an overabundance of data. So one of the big challenges that I talked about with regards to business intelligence and analytics is how can we harness that data? It's going to be the number one challenge for getting this AI to take off, is to have the right data available to it that it can use. So I'd say the challenge becomes, can we process data in such a way that we know how to collect it and provide it to tools like ChatGPT that we're trying to train, so that it has the right data and it can apply it in ways that will allow those things that I showed to actually become real. I don't think everyone has to become an expert in data or data science, but I think there'll be room for more data scientists as we go along, because as ChatGPT replaces the need for lots of manual work where we were doing like content cleansing and stuff like that, hopefully those people can be re-skilled into areas where they're data scientists that can use that to help train the AI tools.
Perfect. And we have Angela Forrest has her hand up for a question.
Yes, just kind of related to the previous comments about kind of the profession, the KM profession. One of the things that I've thought about a lot is just because doing knowledge management, you utilize so many different skills, whether you're talking about facilitation or communication or project management, that it does, I feel like, make it easy for someone who does knowledge management to kind of spin off into training or even like monitoring, evaluation, and learning. I know some folks who've moved into that area. And so I guess my question is, as far as Stan, your perspective, is that what you see as far as like the field, people who are either coming into KM from those different areas, communications and monitoring, evaluation, learning, or the opposite, like it's a very fluid kind of back and forth with the people coming into the profession and the people who are leaving and moving into other areas?
Yes, thank you for that question. I do think it is the latter. It's the moving in and moving out. So there'll be people who have other backgrounds who after you think about it, there aren't that many people who have any real formal training in knowledge management. So we've all come from some other background. In my own case, I had a background working as a computer programmer when I started out, but I also had some training as a journalist. So I think that combination was helpful to me when I got into knowledge management later on. And I think that's true for lots of people. They come from a wide range of backgrounds and disciplines, and something about them, usually they have some keen interest in sharing, and that leads them into the field. And so I think people do come from all these different fields. Some people come through the programs like Brett went through at Columbia, but other people just come from their library science background or from technical backgrounds or from HR. And that's really great. There's this melting pot of backgrounds. But also people who either after a period of time lose their job or get disillusioned will often then find themselves going off to do something else. So I think it's probably the same thing I mentioned about the ebb and flow. There's kind of a constant level, and the outgoing kind of equals the incoming. So it's going to work both ways, but we do tend to collect a lot of people who have done other things in their careers. And I think that's one of the strengths of knowledge management. We have this diversity of experience that we've drawn.
And Stan, if I can stop you real quick here. So we got a couple more questions, but we do want to get to the raffle. So Tara, can you explain what the raffle is? And I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. So if you can stop sharing, Stan, and we'll go ahead and get the wheel of names. Which is something
Okay,
yeah, go ahead, Tara, and I will get set up.
yeah. So, we have a few prizes and, we're going to raffle them off. And, Bill has, he found this tool and people's names are on there. So, this is really going to be a wonderful thing. And again, this is to celebrate the fact that our community has lasted this long, and it's all fun. So we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary, and Bill's going to be doing. We have a couple of prizes.
Mhm.
Um,
So I'll spin the wheel for you, and you tell people what they won.
okay.
Ready for the first spin? Ready, Tara?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
This is, of course, AI, right? Angela Forrest, what did she win?
She wins a $25 Amazon gift certificate.
All right. So Angela, make sure you send us your email, and we can get that gift certificate to you. Okay. So send it to, you can put it in the chat, or you can send it to me or Tara. All right.
Yay.
Yeah. What's the next prize?
The next prize is another $25 gift certificate.
Okay. And, oh, like Wheel of Fortune. Alan Foote. Make sure
All right.
make sure you send us your email address, and we'll get that prize to you. All right. What's next?
Now, I thought we had one of Stan's books
Mm-hmm.
that we were going to raffle off.
Mhm.
And do we know which book? Since you're a multiple author.
Yeah, no, Stan. I think we asked you, and you wanted to give out the community one, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, great.
So make sure if you do, tell us if you prefer the hardback, paperback, whatever edition. So you need to give us your email address and a mailing address. So are we ready?
Ready.
Oh, Lenroy London. Congratulations.
Great.
Okay. And that's all the prizes, right?
No, we got a couple more,
Okay.
or rather one more. This is
Okay.
a grand prize.
All
This
right.
is a $50 gift certificate to from Amazon.
All right.
So spin
Ready?
away. Yep.
Yep. Oh. Oh. So please make sure you send us your email address, okay? Thank you. It's kind of like, it's like on Wheel of Fortune or like Price is Right when it just, yeah. Very realistic. Okay, great. So I'm going to stop sharing this. Okay.
Great.
And Stan, we wanted to thank you again for presenting. This is a great, great moment here. And we have a lot of thank yous coming through and a few more questions if you want. So I'm certain if you guys want to connect with Stan, you can, of course, just, connect with him on LinkedIn, and you can ask your questions in. And when's your next book coming out? I know you said next year, right? Do you have a date or?
I don't have a date. I may come out earlier than then. I'm ahead of schedule, so if it comes out at the end of this year, that'd be as early as it would come out.
Okay, great. So how many books does that make for you now?
That'll be number 5. So the first book was on implementing KM. That one's out of print, but it's available online for free as a PDF. The second one is proven practices for promoting a KM program. You can get that electronic copy for free from Lucidia.
Mhm.
The third book is Community Management Handbook. That one is not for free, but it's an in-depth book about communities of practice. And the fourth book, The 5 C's of KM, you can also get for free from Lucidia. So 3 out of the 4 books are available for free. 1 you actually have to pay for.
Okay. And I'm gonna let it, Tara, do you want to close out with any remarks?
Just want to thank everybody again for coming, and I will see you all next month at our meeting. And please feel free to reach out to our community, to me. This is really like a calling, at least for me. So, but thank you so much for your time. And Stan, what a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome.
Everybody have a great month. We'll see you next month.
You'll have a good night. We'll get the recording up soon.
Thank you for watching KMCDC's presentation. Hope to see you at the next monthly meeting.